Republican priorities. And Republicans have been very clear about what's important to them this week. Look, we all know about the illegal war in Iran, which has probably started to distract from the Epstein files, and also to give Trump an excuse to interfere with the November election. It started without a declaration from Congress. It's been going for over a month. It's cost over $25 billion, and it's cost the lives of 13 American service members. Meanwhile, the Strait of Hormuz, it's not open, and only 29% of Americans support the war action, according to polls. So I want to do a quick comparison. $25 billion, that's what we've already spent on the Iran war in 1 month. That $25 billion could have funded 1 year of healthcare for 3.1 million Americans. 3.1 million people who are currently uninsured, who cannot afford to see a doctor, who are one medical emergency away from bankruptcy. We're the only country that can happen in. We could have covered them for a year. Instead, we bombed Iran, and it's not going well. The strait is still closed. Oil is through the roof. Iran is charging $2 million tolls per ship to get through the strait. The stock market's collapsing. Consumer confidence is in the gutter. Everything is going wrong. And we could have spent that money to save American lives. And yet the Pentagon wants $200 billion more from Congress to keep doing more of it. But before we get to how Republicans want to pay for that $200 billion, and I promise you, you are going to be furious, I need to tell you about what the president is threatening to do. Because while Congress debates cutting health care, Medicaid to fund this war, that's what they're debating right now, your commander-in-chief is on Truth Social threatening to commit war crimes. Not allegedly, not arguably, the actual ones in the Geneva Convention and in writing. And here is what he posted on Truth Social. Quote, "The United States of America is in serious discussions with a new and more reasonable regime to end our military operations in Iran. Great progress has been made, but if for any reason a deal is not shortly reached, which it probably will be, and if the Hormuz Strait is not immediately open for business, we will conclude our lovely stay in Iran by," listen to this part, "blowing up and completely obliterating all of their electric generating plants, oil wells, and Kharg Island, and possibly all desalination plants, which we will have purposely not yet touched. This will be in retribution for our many soldiers and others that Iran has butchered and killed over the old regime's 47-year reign of terror. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump." Thank you for this. Thank you for your attention to this matter. He's threatening to plunge a country of 90 million people into darkness and signing off like he's disputing a parking ticket. And he says, our lovely stay. Lovely. He is threatening to destroy a nation's entire electric grid, its oil wells, its primary oil export terminal, and possibly every desalination plant. You know, the things that turn salt water into drinking water for tens of millions of people? And then he called it our lovely stay, like we're guests at a bed and breakfast who decided to bomb the hell out of it on checkout day. Now, I want you to look at what international law says about this, specifically the Geneva Conventions, which the United States signed. The Fourth Geneva Convention states explicitly, collective penalties and likewise all measures of intimidation or of terrorism are prohibited. International humanitarian law also prohibits attacks on, quote, objects indispensable for the survival of the civilian population. Power plants, water treatment facilities, desalination plants, all of them specifically protected. It also says civilian harm from strikes must not be excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated. Taking out the power for the entire country, does that sound reasonable in relation to it? No. Amnesty International called Trump's power plant threats directly a threat to commit war crimes. In their exact words, intentionally attacking civilian infrastructure such as power plants is genuinely prohibited. Even in the limited cases that they qualify as military targets, a party still cannot attack power plants if this may cause disproportionate harm to civilians, which it will. Given that such power plants are essential for meeting the basic needs and livelihoods of tens of millions of civilians, attacking them would be disproportionate and thus unlawful under international humanitarian law and could amount to a war crime. Human Rights Watch went further, their officials saying officials' inflammatory public statements have included open threats to kill civilians and destroy critical civilian infrastructure. They also flagged that Pete Hegseth declared no quarter would be given to enemies from Iran, and declared no quarter, meaning you refuse to accept surrenders, because that in and of itself is a war crime under the Geneva Convention. He didn't mumble it. He said it at a press conference on television at the Pentagon, right after a prayer service asking Jesus to help them commit overwhelming violence. There's a rights group, Dawn, that said threatening to obliterate a nation's power grid, oil infrastructure, and water supply to coerce its government is not a negotiation tactic. It's textbook collective punishment and a war crime. What did the White House have to say about it? What did Carolyn Leavitt have to say about it? She said that this administration won't take anything off the table. That's their answer. War crimes are on the table. Still. So that's your Iran war. It's illegal, it's unpopular, it's possibly being used to distract from the Epstein investigations, and now it is being conducted with open threats to commit war crimes, posted in all caps on social media. And the Republican plan to fund $200 billion more of it is cutting your health care. Again, how would we come up with all that money? The Republican plan to pay for it is awful. House Republicans are considering all of these cuts to health care to pay for the war. Let's let Americans die so that we can kill people half a world away to cover up the abuse of children allegedly by our president. Cuts to your health care. Not cuts to the Pentagon's procurement waste, not cuts to the $65 billion in tax breaks that came from the one big, beautiful bill that were handed to billionaires last year. Not cuts to anything that cost wealthy donors money. It is cuts to the Affordable Care Act, the cost-sharing subsidies that help low-income Americans pay their premiums. Cuts that the CBO says would increase out-of-pocket costs, and it would drive an additional 300,000 people off of their health insurance. 300,000 more uninsured Americans, so that we can fund another month of a war that a majority of Americans want to stop now. And what's the goal of this war? When you ask, they just make up whatever is popular that week, essentially saying, trust us with the goal of the war. Trust us. The same administration that said the war would take 4 weeks. The same administration whose Secretary of Defense is openly praying for overwhelming violence. The same administration that extended the Hormuz deadline 3 times and counting. Trust us. Trust us while Trump has already cut Medicaid by nearly $1 trillion in that big, beautiful bill. That legislation is projected to leave an additional 15 million people uninsured when it's fully implemented. Tax credits for the ACA, they've already expired. Americans are paying an average of $780 more per year in health insurance right now as a result. Healthcare costs have more than doubled for 22 million Americans since this year began, and the proposed solution to this $200 billion war bill is cut more Americans off of their healthcare. It's a shame. It's absolutely a shame. Donald Trump's begging for this war to be over, and yet Iran keeps saying the talks haven't happened. Iran's parliament is calling Trump a liar. Oil futures, they've spiked and crashed, all based on Trump's social media posts. And meanwhile, the Strait of Hormuz is still closed, the war continues on, and the healthcare cuts, they keep coming. They keep coming. It's the party that says that they're fighting for the American people. They're not. They're fighting to cut your healthcare to fund a war that nobody supports. They're fighting to threaten war crimes that nobody's going to stop, and they're fighting to distract from a dead child abuser and to keep his client list secret. And the only way that any of this makes it out into the public is if you share it, if you subscribe, if you get the notifications, because the algorithm, they are not pushing this story without your help.